Um,
Speaking of voice acting, you've got one heck of a voice yourself there.
oh, thank you.
Your basic voice of God.
Yeah. So I can just kind of jump around, but go. I can also just go in order in terms of your career.
Okay, no
Um,
worries.
so what led up to you being in the Chris Mulkey movie Tomcats in the late 70s?
Tomcats. Oh my goodness gracious. You are really taking me back into ancient history. Believe me, there are no written records or survivors from that age.
Well, because following that, it said that your next on-camera role would have been a 1983 episode of the Jeffersons.
Yes, that was fantastic. I was relatively new in LA and went in for an audition on that. And it was one of those auditions where you're a young actor, and this is at the time was a major project, a major sitcom. Everybody knew the
Mhm.
Jeffersons, and you go to the audition and you're trying to be terribly pro, but you're scared to death. And you're trying to do the scene and whatever, and be a snob because that's what the character called for. And I remember either the producer or director looking at me and saying, "Have you ever been in three camera comedy?" And I said, "No." I figured that's the death knell. And he looked at me and said, "Well, maybe we can fix that." So next thing I knew, the phone call came in, and there I was. And it was the episode with Gladys Knight,
Oh, wow.
which was fantastic. So I got to meet her, and it was my first experience with three camera. And the good thing about three camera is that there is an audience. There are three cameras. It's a lot like live theater, and my
Mhm.
background is live theater. So for me, it was absolutely home territory. I could go in there and I could do that. But I didn't have a lot of on set experience at that point. And I was working with Marla Gibbs, God love her, she's brilliant. The nicest person on the planet. And I had to work intimately with her in several comedy scenes. And I'll never forget, there was one time she was looking at me, and the camera was largely to the back of her head, and I had to do whatever I had to do. And she just looked at me, and her eyes got this interesting look, and she smiled, and she just shifted her weight slightly to the side. What she was doing was clearing me for the camera.
Oh,
She had the experience, I didn't, and she was being gracious. There
mhm.
are so many actors you work with who would have said, "See, back of my head's more important than you."
Right.
But she actually slipped to the side and allowed the young performer who was clearly out of her element
Mhm.
to get the shot. She was wonderful. I really enjoyed working with her. It was a terrific experience. It was a guest star credit, which I particularly enjoyed, and to meet Gladys Knight was amazing.
Mhm.
So yes, it was probably one of the most exciting first jobs that I had in Hollywood.
And were you often going out for auditions for major television shows at that time too?
Off and on, it's it's a very strange world out
Mhm.
there. You go out for major things, you go out for minor things, you go out for whatever is going, especially when you're young and you're starting out, and you do a great deal if you're smart. You do a great deal of theater. Not necessarily because you're going to be discovered in a play, although it does happen, but more to the point, you're continuing to hone your skills. You're continuing to grow as a performer. You're continuing to stretch yourself and give yourself roles, or try to give yourself roles that you might not get in the high paying world.
Mhm.
So as a performer, it gives you more versatility. So that's what the world consists of out there. If the audition comes up, you go to it, regardless of what it is. And you try to do the best you can. And then you find out that auditioning is a very weird process. you may be the most talented person who walks through the door. That does not mean you're going to get cast.
Mhm.
You might be too tall. You might be too short. You may look like the director's ex-wife. Things like that you can't control will affect whether or not you're actually cast. But you continue to do it to the best of your ability. And auditioning is, in fact, the real job. It's an unpaid job, but it is the real job of an actor to audition, audition, audition. And it's like sending out a blast shot. You never know what's going to hit. And you never know why either.
No, in relation to that, the first show that you did in LA led you into doing stunt work, and then which led into voice work.
Yes, and there is a truism among actors where they say that work begets work.
Mhm.
That's our version of the begats, I guess, from the Bible. Work begets work. It always does, because you never know who you're going to meet or where they're going to go thereafter. The first show I did in California was a very unusual production of Coriolanus, because I loved Shakespeare, so why not? And I ended up playing a role that doesn't actually exist in the script. It was a pastiche of various other roles that was put together, and we created the role of the wife of Tullus Ophidius, which doesn't exist. And I made her an Etruscan priestess, and she became the head of the secret police for Ophidius, and we created this whole thing. It was almost a sword and sorcery.
Mhm.
Coriolanus. I was running around in a chainmail bikini beating up on Romans. But in the course of that, I met several actors and several people who were involved in sword fighting and theatrical violence, if you will, which I had a background in because of my background in classical theater. And also I'd performed at a Renaissance fair in New York, that sort of thing. So we all kind of became this little group that all knew each other. And that led to a role in Universal Studios tour, was doing a production of Conan the Barbarian, a live action Conan at the tour.
Mhm.
And I played Red Sonja in that, and that led to other things. Also, one of the people that I met in terms of classical theater became the person who gave me my first job in voiceover. That was Tom Weiner.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you never know who you're going to meet, how it's going to affect you, and when the phone is going to ring and somebody that you haven't seen in 5 or 10 years will say, "Hi, remember me? We did the production of fill in the blank, and now I'm doing the production of fill in the other blank, and I'd like you for the role of fill in the third blank." And all of a sudden you're working again.
Mhm.
So it's a progression, and the more you are out there and the more you are seen and the more you are involved in the community, the better your chances of finding a job.
So in moving on to stunt work, what was your um, experience working on Spellbinder?
Spellbinder was a really cool job. I really enjoyed that. Basically, I was in the role that was called the Young Witch. She didn't have a name, but she had to have a rather exceptional battle
Mhm.
with Tim Daly. And it was in this wonderful old mansion, and it was on the top of the balcony, the balconies that sometimes look down into the main anteroom or living area. And we had a martial arts type fight. So we're fighting and we're doing all this stuff. And at the end, he's standing with his back to the balcony and a drop of a story or so. And I had to rush at him, jump up as if I were going for his throat. He would duck down. I would fly over his head and do the high fall to the floor.
Mhm.
And here again, I ran into a remarkably wonderful actor, Mr. Tim Daly, because I had to launch off of what they call a half apple. It's a small box, and it was on a wooden floor. So if I had jumped onto this box and launched myself, it would have slid backwards on the slippery floor and arguably messed up my high fall and gotten me hurt. Well, he knew this. So as I rushed at him, he dropped out of sight, as he was supposed to do, and wrapped his body around this little box and grabbed it. so that when I launched off of the box to do the high fall, it was stable. How many actors would have thought of that?
Oh,
How
yeah.
many actors would have been that kind and that sensitive? And I'm sure he didn't want to be the one responsible for getting me killed either, but it was a wonderful thing to know that he had my back, especially since when I went over this balcony, I then had to do a decent sized high fall to the
Right.
ground. And once I hit the ground, okay, great, hit the ground, but they don't show that, of course, because I'm hitting a big airbag. I had to do an insert shot where they had a ladder on the ground floor, and I had to jump off the ladder, do a spin, a flip, and show the landing.
Okay. Wow.
And I did that trying to get it correct for them because it has to be the right matching shot 2 or 3 times. And I was more than happy to continue doing it until they got exactly what they wanted. But the director looked at me and said, "Please stop. I can't watch anymore." But it was, oh, actually, that was another first for me. It was the first time that I'd ever had a stand-in working with me. Somebody who was, I was first team, they were second team, and when they were setting up the lighting shots, I got to go relax and somebody else took my place for the lighting setup. And I thought that was great. You know, I suddenly felt like a star. So yeah, it was a fun shoot. It was a difficult shoot. It required the stunt skills that I had been developing to be actually put to the test: martial arts, high fall, gymnastics in the air, you know. And this was an interesting side journey for me because I had trained as an actor. Okay, a physical actor, I'll grant you, but an actor. And here was an action acting role.
Right.
It suited me right, you should pardon the expression, down to the ground. And I loved it. And there were more of them that came, but that was one of the first and most fun.
Did you get to interact with Kelly Preston?
To some extent, I also doubled her in one shot,
Okay.
but it's a funny thing. The people who you are the stunt double for often come up to you and surreptitiously say, "Thank you.
No.
Better you than me." Um, it's a point of curiosity, I think, for a lot of actors when their stunt double shows up. They want to see how close the match is. They want to find out more about you, not consistently, but quite often. And they almost feel a kinship with you because you're literally taking the bullet for them. You're the one who's going to go out there and be endangered so that they don't have to be. And they know it. Not everyone is that, oh, grateful, but a lot of them are. And it's always very gratifying to have somebody come over and appreciate what you're doing.
Another movie around that same time that I personally liked that I thought it was cool to see you be a part of too is Blue Desert.
Blue Desert. Yes, Courtney Cox, as I recall, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
that Blue Desert? Yeah. That that was less. That was a bit of fighting, as I recall, and not that difficult. If you're trained to fight, doing a fight is not that big a deal. You can pull that out of stock, as it were.
Mhm.
I'm glad that you saw that, though. It's not one that everyone has encountered or seen.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that somebody's watching.
And how about with when you got to be a part of the mask?
The Mask. Yeah. Um, very unfortunately, from my perspective, they changed the concept. Originally, what they wanted to have happen would be to have Amy Yasbeck's character, the redheaded girl. She was going to die. The bad guy was going to grab her. She was going to be thrown in the air. If you recall the scene with the big printing presses in the
Mm-hmm.
huge warehouse, She was going to be thrown in the air by the bad guy and fall into the printing presses. And the newspapers that were coming out from the printing press were going to be black and white, and they had a picture of the mask, and it said "Mask Seen in City." And then as she falls through the printing presses, the papers start coming out with red print, and her face kind of smashed against a window, and it said "Reporter Killed in Freak Accident." That was going to be the joke. As it turns out, they had her character continue on, and I guess they just changed the concept. But if you happen to have the DVD and you look at the special features, deleted scenes, you will see me doing the flying for her, because when the bad guy throws her, she has to fly up about 2 stories high and fall into the printing press. Now, of course, I'm not going to fall into the printing press, but flying backwards for 2 stories and up is what I had to do for her. And Amy Yazbek, also very grateful. She was one who was looking at me going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, please don't die." She was watching me, and she was gray-faced watching me do this thing. Actually, I was pretty gray-faced myself, because when they were first setting up the shot, the riggers have to work with a sandbag of your approximate weight to make sure that it flies properly, that it can maintain you, that you are not going to get hurt or tangled or broken. So they're working on it for hours. And the first couple of tries, I saw the sandbag hit the big printing press, and I was like, oh boy. You suddenly look at that and you reconsider your career choice. Another time that you reconsider your career choice is when you're up in the air over these big printing presses, which were enormous. This was a huge warehouse, and when those things were moving, the whole building shook. So we're talking some pretty intimidating machinery, and very dangerous. If something had gone wrong with the rigging, yeah, you're going to get killed. End of story. But I was up on top. They had done the throw, and I'm hanging there waiting for them to bring me down so we can do it again. And I'm looking down at these 2-story huge drum printing presses, and the building is shaking. And by the way, it's like 2, 3 in the morning when this is going on. And I'm bouncing around at the end of this string, looking down at this thing that's going to eat me if anything goes wrong. And, you're looking down there and you're saying things like, why didn't I listen to my mother? Why didn't I go to law school? Why am I up here? And then you realize why you're up here, because you're really doing what you love. You really are. Performing, to me, performing is performing. If it takes the form of Shakespeare, great. If it takes the form of sitcom, great. If it takes the form of stunt work, great. Performing is performing. You're doing what you love to do. And that's why you're up in the air at 3 in the morning over a 2-story printing press.
So in between that kind of same time frame, like in the mid to late 90s, or maybe it was even before that, do you know what your first anime role was?
I was in a really good place when anime came across. I had met some folks that were doing voice work before anime per se happened. We were doing dubbing of foreign films into English primarily. And they were coming from everywhere. They were coming from Europe, they were coming from Asia, they were coming from all over the place. One of the first things I did was a film called William the Conqueror, which was a live action film, but it came over from Europe. This is an interesting little tidbit for people who are not familiar with voice work. When you are dubbing, it's easier if you're dubbing into English to dub from a language like German and have it match than from a language like Italian or Spanish. Because Italian or Spanish, a lot of the words end in vowels. Ours don't. So it's going to not match as well as if you were doing something like German, which tends to close at the end of words like English does. So William the Conqueror was an interesting early job to have, because if you were dubbing one of the people who were speaking English or German, your work looked better than some of the other actors that were speaking Portuguese, Italian, or Spanish. It was a weird live action film where the actors on the set were all speaking different languages. But it was a tremendous training job. You really had to work at that one. And at about that time, anime sort of was making its way in. At that time, we just thought of it as Japanese dubbing.
Right.
It didn't really register that this was going to become a phenomenon. You never know until later what's going to become a phenomenon. But I was able to get in on the ground floor of anime when it first arrived. So I was in productions like Robotech
Yep.
and the original Captain Harlock. And a few of those led to one of the anime roles that I'm actually most proud of, and that was Fist of the North Star, Julia.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't get roles like that a lot. She's your basic heroic ingenue type person. I tend to get the bad girls because I have the deeper voice. So to be given a role like that as the ingenue lead was remarkable and just overwhelming. I don't get those a lot. And I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that. And thank you to the late Carl Masek for giving me the choice.
Could you, in the role of Julia, could you relate to her at all?
Yes, I could actually, primarily because she is an ingenue, but she also can stand up for herself as she stands up to Shin, for example. She basically can put her hands on her hips and say, hell no. And that's something I always admire in a person. Interesting point about the dubbing is that you don't always see all of the film. In fact, generally you don't. You just see the scenes that you're doing. So I saw the scenes that I was doing, and then when I finally went to see the screening, I was kind of taken aback because I hadn't seen a lot of the gore.
Oh, right.
Fist of the North Star is pretty splattery. So, eyeballs hanging out and trails all over the place. And it was like, oh my goodness, I guess I wasn't in most of those. And of course, I have to admit, Julia, on a personal note, was my first nude scene.
Oh, yeah.
Now, mind you, Julia got to do it, not me, but still, I considered her my body double for that one.
And I know moving ahead, wasn't a whole lot later, but when you got to be in roles like Lady Debonair and Ray Earth.
Lady, thank you for bringing her up. She was one of the roles that I wish there were more of in later anime. They seem to sort of fade out the big bad females. But she had that marvelous laugh. And I am very sorry that I don't recall the lady who did the Japanese version of Lady Debonair. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was wonderful. When you first go in and you're looking at a role that you're going to do in anime, you do have the Japanese to listen to. And sometimes it's a good performance, and sometimes it's not as good a performance. It depends. But she was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. She was powerful, and she was evil, and she was, a maleficent character, and her laugh was incredible. So I really tried to honor her by trying to do a performance as good as hers if I could, certainly as big and as bold as hers.
Right.
And that laugh. Oh, that laugh. I wish more people remembered Lady Debonair because characters like that, like I said, they faded out of later anime. And those of us who are female with deeper voices really miss them.
Yep. Well, because one series that was really impactful to me and I still love was Fushikiyuki. And I love how you handled Soy in that.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Again, not one of the ones that everyone remembers first and foremost, but one of the ones that meant a lot to a number of people who don't always bring it up. So I appreciate that.
Do you remember, is there anything that stands out about the process of getting into soy? Because I obviously, with Bridget Hoffman directing everybody.
You know, I nothing specific about
Okay.
that, but I'm sure Bridget could give you more on character development of all the characters in that than I could.
And then another role that I think is even more interesting is when you got to be Kamatari in Kenshin, since that's obviously a gay trans character way before that was kind of the norm to see over in the US.
Oh yeah. And thank goodness they came in, because when the big bad evil women faded out, the androgynes came in, and
Yeah.
that's what saved most of our careers who have the deeper voices. Interestingly, you know, the previous version of Kenshin, which was Samurai X. You
Yep.
familiar with that? Okay. In that, I played Misao.
Oh, yeah.
When we went to the second version, and that was a very different, that, oh, okay, there's a story. In Samurai X, it was before there was this huge movement to be incredibly loyal to the original Japanese, and the people who were writing and creating it, even Carl Masick with what he did with Robotech, whatever, they would bring it over and they would Americanize things or anglicize or whatever you want to call it, a lot more than they did later. And in Samurai X, I mean, you even had the medieval Japanese cops running around with Irish accents. So it was it was a whole different world. And Richard Cancino playing Kenshin, of course, and you know we're friends. And there I am, Misao. So here we go, and we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it as more, well, more like what the Japanese was. We're going to do a much more straight version of it. Okay, and they actually considered me for the role of Kenshin.
Oh, wow.
It came down, as I recall, it came down to me and Richard Cancino. And of course, he got it. For heaven's sakes, he knew the role backwards and forwards. He absolutely should have gotten it. But just for a moment, I almost was Kenshin in the second one,
Wow.
which, because Kenshin's a little interesting himself. But here comes Kamatari. I wasn't going to do Misao because by that time I was a little bit older and my voice had darkened, deepened a little bit. So Misao is a little light. But Kamatari, perfect. And I started to make almost a career out of doing the androgynous, is it male, is it female, what the heck is it, kind of roles. And the kind of voice I have, it actually makes a great deal of sense.
Mhm.
But she was, again, tough, strong, and really didn't care one little bit what anybody thought of her. And that's, you know, or everyone's a little conflicted. We're all human, even characters are human. But I like that. I like the boldness of it. I like the groundedness of it. I like these people who could basically stand there and say, I am who I am. Take it
Mhm.
or leave it. Your opinion does not affect me in one little iota of a bit.
Mhm.
And why not? So, yeah, Kamatari was the first of them. More of them came down the road. You'll probably be bringing up one of them later. one of my androgynes from Cowboy Bebop with VT, the
Yep.
heavy metal queen. And there again, are you male? Are you female? What's your name? Nobody needs to know. I am me.
Yep.
That's a great character to play. You don't have to work too hard on those.
Is there a, and when you are getting roles like that in comparison to, for lack of a better word, more normal roles, is there like a particular headspace that you get yourself into for playing someone who's a different gender?
Well, there's a headspace you get into with playing anybody.
Yeah.
You, one of the things that troubles me sometimes when I talk to young performers or people who want to get into voice acting is when people say, I can do that. I do voices. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Now, there are people who approach it that way. I'm not one of them. I don't do voices. I play people. People have voices. And the character will tell you what the voice is, often with the help of the director, who will tell you that that's a nice voice, but we're not doing it that way. And you have to rethink the whole thing. But these are people, these characters. They are human beings, or in some cases, flying purple blobs, but that was, another story. But they're all their own entity. And the entities express themselves in certain ways. And you really want to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
They will, getting your head in the right place is where this all came from, but it's getting into their head that's really the adventure. Listen to them, understand who they are, and then try to bring that out, and generally the voice will follow upon that. Anyway, that's my approach. Not every
Okay.
actor goes that way, but that is my approach. I try to respect the character as their own being.
Mm-hmm.
This is harder to do when you're doing things like video games, where the characters tend to be a little more one-dimensional for a start. And second of all, sometimes you're just given that character's lines broken out from everything else. So you do not know context. You don't know who they're talking to. You don't know if they like who they're talking to. You don't know much about them at all. That makes it much harder to create a character in a game. And very often you have to rely on the director, who is aware of what goes on in the larger picture of the project, to give you an idea of who it is you're playing.
Yeah.
But when you've been working on a series in particular, you can get a feel for them. You can respect them and do the character development that I was talking about. And then, of course, sometimes you're thrown a tremendous curve. You've got a character, it's moving along, you know where it's going, and then you find out 3 or 4 episodes down the road that there's something about them you didn't know, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
and that your approach, if you had known that, would have been different from the beginning. But you've already established it. So sometimes you can just tweak it, edge it a little bit in the direction of the new information. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a different process. So can you get into the head of somebody that you're talking about? Do you have to change your mindset? I believe you absolutely must alter your mindset to respect the character, regardless of the project.
And in terms of anime, uh, continuing off of that same topic, if there is a single one that you could pick, like the single most darkest place you've had to go to for a character.
Darkest place. Well, I'm sure there are plenty of dark places that I've gone to that are not immediately coming to mind, but one that comes up really quickly would be Sword from Technoman or Tekkaman Blade.
Oh, yeah.
She, a dark girl, a bad girl, but one hopelessly in love with somebody who does not return that love, and it costs her life. Well, it's hard to get darker than that.
Yeah.
And she was fun because you have created this big, evil, nasty person who then people feel sympathy for because of her circumstance. A little
Right.
twist there, a little turn of the knife. And Paranoia Agent, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
With Little Slugger and everything. Well, okay, I had to go real dark for that because I was basically playing second fiddle to my husband throughout it all, and then suddenly turned into the big bad killer, the one who stops the whole evilness. That took some twisting. There are any number of them, and because of who I am, I find it easy to tap into the darkness.
Oh, okay.
I also have a sick sense of humor, so it balances out.
Completely on the opposite side of that. I can imagine that it just had to be crazy, fun, insane to be Torpedo Girl.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. That was literally a screaming riot. She was another easy character for me. She came right out of my diva side. And the idea of being a torpedo in high heels, I mean, how can you not love that? she she actually has stayed in my reality quite a
Oh,
bit. People remember her, and people sometimes find it hard to believe that the same person who played Torpedo Girl played something like Sword.
definitely.
But that's again who we are and what we do. What was actually funny about that, Michael Sorich was directing Bo 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 Bo, and however many bows you want to give it, and he did not audition me for that.
Oh,
We've known each other a long time, and he just looked at that and said, "Oh, ho, ho, no one else should touch this one. Give me your Melodee," because he knew that I would have a great deal of fun with it. And I did, and I did. How not? The Bobobo was an interesting project anyway, and nobody could have directed it like he did because he has a very, very broad sense of humor, and you need it. Even for people who had been working in anime for decades, we looked at Bobobo and went, "What the heck is that?"
yeah.
Even for anime standards, it was really out there, and that's what made it tremendous fun.
Uh, Obviously, it's not as crazy, but um, Digimon too, with all the different roles that you played in that.
Yeah, Digimon. Digimon was quite a journey. We had There are so many versions of it, and I finally managed in one of the versions to play Biomon, which I normally don't get. Some of us have switched back and forth, and roles have been played by different people. But I did start Birdramon and Crusadermon and Lady Devimon and a few others. And the thing that was fun about Birdramon was probably the easiest job I ever had in my life because I would go into the studio, squawk, digivolve, and go home.
Mhm.
That was about it. She didn't run off at the mouth, our Birdramon. But I do remember the day that they said, "You're also going to play Garudamon." And I said, "Okay, tell me, what is that?" And they said, "Well, it's the next level up from Birdramon, same character, but up one." Okay, good. Let me see Garudamon. Let me see what it is. And they started to pan down this picture of Garudamon, and I'm seeing the big bird head, and I'm seeing the Kachina sort of feeling to it. That's looked very cool. And then I saw the chest, and I went, "Uh-oh, it's a boy." And then they went to the loincloth, and I said, "Boy, is that a boy. Oh, boy, is that a boy. That is a huge, yes, very big boy." And I realized that Garudamon was going to be a challenge, even for me, because Garudamon was undeniably and very loudly male.
Yep.
So for him, you don't have to just get into the head for him. You have to get into the physical position. Literally, I mean, it required standing a certain way and tightening all the muscles in a certain way to get that warrior feeling. And the Garudamon voice had to come up from the basement.
Yep.
Really did. And then unfortunately, he was written like Tonto. So on top of that, it had to be like the wasabi kind of thing.
Yeah.
But but I did that. And I was very happy to do that. And of course, Crusadermon, Lady Devimon is another one very popular in the fan base. There are people who walk over to me now who have, big, tall, fully grown men with bushy beards and say that Lady Devimon got them through puberty.
Yep.
And given her costuming, I'm not surprised. She was a slinky girl. But we did have that one battle between Lady Devimon and Anjiwamon. And interestingly, in another episode, I had to voice match Anjiwamon, and I actually did like an episode of that. That's not my character. I didn't lay no claim to Anjiwamon, but it was just ironic that I got a
Yeah.
chance to do that. And then, like I said later, the roles got recast hither and yon. Some people used the original actors, some people didn't, so it's all over the place. But Birdramon, Lady Devimon, Crusadermon, I do lay claim to them. And
Yeah.
Garudamon, I lay claim to them because Garudamon just about ripped my throat to shreds. But yeah, that was quite a run, and I appreciated that very much. And it's one that absolutely the fan base remembers. A lot of people grew up with Digimon.
Yeah, completely. I know that you were in, I think, 2 or 3 of the Dynasty Warriors games as Diao Chan.
Yes, I was, and that is another one that it's like a bit of a sleeper to me. It's one that a lot of the fan base people remember very, 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 very much. It
Hmm.
seems to have had an impact out of proportion to the amount of time I spent on it. And I'm very grateful that it did. But she actually, I think Dao Chan actually has her own Facebook page,
Oh,
which I thought was hysterical. Went there one time and said, "Hello, old friend. How are you doing? I'm really glad you're still alive."
I know more recent anime roles that you got to be in Gurren Lagann, which is an amazing series.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you like that one too. There's there are a number of them that have popped up, but as I said, it's been a little bit harder for people in my vocal range to find the right roles in anime. If I
Mm.
were male, I'd be working more. It sounds weird, but it's true. But being a female with a deeper register, the right role has to come up. If that follows,
Yeah.
you have to. I'm not a one-trick pony by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not going to be playing the 8-year-olds who saved the universe.
Hmm.
I'm going to be the bad guy who's trying to destroy the universe. So it has to be the right role,
I think
and a few of those have happened.
yeah. Well, I
Go
think
ahead.
most recently that you got to be Rose Lucia in Gundam Red Comet.
Okay, sometimes what they do on some of these things is they reuse some of our
Oh,
stuff from earlier. There it is, Advent of the Red Comet. Oh, look at that. I'm looking at my own IMDb page here. And how about that? I believe that might have been reuse,
okay.
which is fine. Which is fine. We have no problem with that. That's all part of the job.
And even though it's not anime, what was your experience being on OKKO?
Well, no, it's not anime. That is what we refer to as original animation.
Mhm.
It is entirely different as a process from anime. Some of your other actor people may have covered this, but in anime, you work alone.
Yeah.
You're all alone in a studio, and they show you what you have to do, and you match what's going on, and you try to arrange it properly so that everyone sounds like they're talking to everyone because nobody's in the same room. In original animation, everyone is in the same room. So it's a little bit more like radio theater. It's almost like radio theater from the 1930s and 40s. It's all of us, except we don't have somebody in the back doing the sound effects. Everybody is there performing together, seeing the script largely for the first time. Sometimes you get to see it a day or two before, and that's helpful. But OKKO was a very, it's a very odd project. It's actually got quite a following, which I find really, really charming. It was a character, Foxtail, that to some extent I based on somebody that I knew years and years ago, whose name I will not mention, who was from the South, and she was not very tall, very, very strong, kind of a fire pluggy gal. and she had that gruff Southern voice.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, that would work for Foxtail. Let's try that. So I put that out there, and the creative team said, oh, that sounds great. We'll take that. And that's how Foxtail came to be. Very gruff, very Southern. And just the idea that she was a wrestler who turned out to be a military leader. Here we go again. Another one of those light, fluffy characters that Spevack does. But yeah, it was a very different, and thank goodness it happened before COVID, because original animation with everybody in the same studio would have been much more difficult if you had to do social distancing, and it won't work at all with a mask.
Yep.
So yeah, that was a great character, and how can you not love old Foxtail? I'm looking at a picture of her now with her bulgy muscles. What a character.
So in terms of more like most recently with voice work, is most of what you have been doing lately ADR for major films and TV shows?
To some extent, and also there's been work on games in
Yep.
particular, and I can't go into detail because of NDAs, but in particular the Warcraft projects. I
Okay.
can go that far, but I can't go any further than that. But keep watching for me.
Okay.
And Hearthstone, those.
Yep.
And continuing on, I'm hoping. I mean, I love to work. It's hard to explain to anyone who has a real job what this world is like.
Mhm.
We never have a well, that's not so. We very often actors have had 9 to 5s or other things to try to stay alive, but that's not who we are.
Yep.
We go through our entire lives with a few things that we creative freedom, uh, an ability to be ourselves, and a few things that we don't have: security, a regular paycheck, a knowledge of what the future will bring. We don't have that. Other people have that. If you choose to go into this life, you understand that you will be doing what I call ice skating on saran wrap. It could break at any point and you could fall through.
Yep.
But if you keep your balance and keep your touch light, you can continue ice skating on saran wrap. Now, this goes through the entire career. And then when you get to a point in your life where other people are retiring, you never do that either. We keep going. It's
Yep.
rare for an actor to retire, as in, I don't want to work anymore. Even a retired actor, if you go to them and say, yeah, but I have this role, will generally say, oh, yeah, yes. When do we start? Because you enjoy what you do. This is never work. This is never drudgery. It can be difficult, it can be challenging, it can be a lot of things as you go through life, but it is never the kind of work where it's like, oh gosh, I've got to go back to the office again. You don't do that.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you never retire. This is what you are because this is who you are. This is in your bones. If it's not in your bones, for Christ, don't do it. This is the sort of thing you have to be. You have to be born to this. And the next adventure is always right around the corner. You never know when the phone is going to ring. You never know what the next job is going to be. Even now, I get auditions and send them in all the time. And some things I'm handed. Some things I have to fight for.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. That doesn't change as you get older, as you move along in the industry, unless you're like A-list or something. I'm not talking about those guys. They live in a different reality. I'm talking about the rest of us who I consider the workman actors.
Hmm.
The guys in the basement, the Morlocks. We're the ones who are oiling the machines and keeping it going. And we keep it going as long as we are vertical and able to breathe. And also it takes you in interesting directions. My career has actually taken me around the world. When we were still doing conventions before COVID,
Yep.
I went all over the place. And who knew when anime came in and it was just another weird dubbing job, that it would turn into something that would have us going to places like Australia, New Zealand, England, Canada. You know, who knew? You never know what direction your career is going to take or what direction the business is going to take and drag you along with it, which is why I've done other things as well. Being an associate producer, doing some casting, doing some directing. You do all that.
Mhm.
You do all that because it's part of the world you love. And I hope the people who are listening can understand that, and understand that if you want to come into this world, you are welcome to do so. But make sure you cannot do anything else and be happy,
Mhm.
because it's not easy. It is not always glamorous. Oh, you think it's glamorous? Wait till you're doing an on camera and that 3 a.m. alarm goes off so that you can be on the set by 4. Oh, yeah, there's glamour. And then you got a 16-hour day coming at you. There's a lot to it that you don't anticipate. But if you're willing to roll with it, and you're willing to grow with it, and you're willing to maintain your sense of humor, you can really have an interesting and varied life in our world.
Right.
It's a good life if you don't weaken, kind of thing.
So I like to end every interview I do with asking what do you want your legacy to be?
I would like my legacy, we've almost covered it, because I would like my legacy to be encouraging to young people who want to come into the industry, but not unrealistic.
Mhm.
The one thing that I was sorry about when I came out of all of my training, because I went through the whole thing, the American Academy in London and this, all this stuff. One thing they never taught was how to market yourself, how to get jobs, how to get an agent, how to the business end of things. And therefore, a lot of us came out of it with a rather unrealistic viewpoint on how it all worked. Idealistic. I would like my legacy to be getting it through to the young actors coming up that it is a wonderful adventure, but be prepared. Learn the business aspect of it. Know how it works. Know how to go about it. And of course, in the 21st century, that's different, because marketing techniques and social networking and all that, it's a different world. But know what you're getting yourself into. And if you're still willing to do it, go for it.
Mhm.
That would be my legacy. Go for it, but go for it with your eyes open.
Yeah, I actually I have a story involving how Fushikiyuki and like the dub of Fushikiyuki helped me through something really serious. I told this to Bridget and Wendy Lee and Steve Staley when I um, interviewed them, because the first time that I saw the series was when I was in 4th grade, and
Hurt me.
and I was renting it via Blockbuster's DVD mail system, like right before Netflix took over.
Mm-hmm.
And one night, me and my family were just out to eat at a local restaurant, and it was just completely normal. And then when we were about to leave, we were told like nobody can leave because there's a guy that shot and killed 2 people, and he crashed his car outside of the restaurant, and he was fleeing on foot and shooting at cops that were surrounding the restaurant. And so everybody had to stay in the restaurant until midnight or 1 o'clock, and we all had to be um, escorted to our cars by really big, heavily armed SWAT team members. And um, I just know that, considering how young I was, that if I didn't have something like Fushikiyuki to go back home and continue watching and growing with the characters, then I wouldn't have probably been able to have get over it as easily.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of story that occasionally comes out. And all I can say is that I am deeply honored to have been part of anything that got you through that,
Mhm.
because that's mind-blowingly frightening, even to an adult, much less a child. Uh, wow. And we've all had them. We've
Yep.
all had, not necessarily as dramatic as that, but we've all had projects or series or movies or something that helped us get through bad times or rough times or confusing times, or in your case, downright terrifying times.
Right.
Again, when I was coming up, I probably the classic Star Trek was mine.
Yep.
And it was an amazing experience all the years later to actually work with the classic cast members, working with them and directing them in 2 of the games.
Hmm.
When you finally meet the people who were part of what got you through your bad times, you are hard pressed to remain professional. Oh, you do. But part of you is jumping up and down and going, oh, 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 oh. You turn into a total fan, because
Yeah.
these are the people who were there for, even though they don't even know it, they were there for you in a way that meant something to you at the time. Their characters were, or whatever. We all have something of that nature that we can look back on and say, that got me through X or Y.
Yeah.
And for an actor, especially in anime, when we work in a little box all by ourselves in the dark, alone, to find out that what we did in a little box in the dark alone meant something that life enhancing to somebody
Mhm.
like you, it, well, there's a legacy.
Yeah.
There's a legacy. How many people inadvertently did we help? And yeah, anime is in very many ways, not all of it, but a lot of it, grabbed the imagination of several generations because it tends to mirror human experience in a different way, in a different universe, in space or in this or in that or wherever they place it. It tends to be very human. The experience is very human. There are people who you care about overcoming obstacles that seem insurmountable. And that gives you hope. That gives you a reason to keep trying, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And if we as actors or directors or whatever we've done have been able to share some of what we are in a way that meant that much to you, what more legacy do we need?
Hmm.
What greater legacy could there be?
Hmm.
We gave somebody hope. Remember what Hamlet said? uh, if one person get, okay, I'm paraphrasing, sorry Shakespeare, but if you're trying to get something across as an actor and nobody gets it, but one person, only one out there out of all the thousands hears you and gets it, you've done your job.
Right.
Boy, was that a paraphrase. I apologize to everyone who ever taught me Shakespeare. But that is the point. If somebody out there heard us, if we made a difference, if we helped you, it doesn't get any better than that. And I hope we can keep doing it.
Yeah.
I hope we can keep doing it. We exist for that. And just as a point of appreciation for you and for everybody else who has listened to our work all through the years, this is a big thank you going out to everybody. Because without all of you listening, appreciating, and watching and doing all the things that you did, anime would never have taken off.
Yep.
It's not us, it's you. We were just guns for hire, you know. You were the guys who made it go. And thank you, thank you, thank you, because it meant a lot to us, as we hope it meant a lot to you.
Oh, well, thank you. This was really informative and interesting for me.
My pleasure. Glad to be there for you.
I'll be sure to once I have it uploaded, I'll be sure to email you the link.
Great, thank you. That would be very nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what is the name of your podcast, by the way?
Oh, it's just a YouTube channel under my name.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Great. Chris, thanks so much.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.